Welcome, everyone. My name is Bill Glanville. I will be moderating today's discussion. Congratulations, Darren, on realizing your goal of publishing your novel, Towers of Hiva. Well done.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Bill, for starting us off today here on Earth Day. I'm excited to see friends and colleagues from around the world. And I know some of you are thinking, Darren, I didn't realize you were writing a novel. And then some of you are thinking, Darren, why did it take you so long to finish this novel? Well, thank you all for joining us. I would have hoped that we weren't launching this book amidst such global turmoil and chaos, but here we are. Unfortunately, Towers of Hiva is not an escape from all that. And I wish I could say that the book is entirely fictional, but it's not. Its characters bump into real life crises, both in the recent and distant past. So in the book, I describe it as Wall Street and Easter Island come crashing together in a cautionary story of two lost civilizations. One perilously lost in the present and the other tragically lost in the past, but both on their journey and searching for peace, sustainability, and resilience. As a consultant, my day job is all about sustainability and resilience. You could say I'm obsessed with trying to understand how things are connected, how society, the economy, the environment are connected, and figuring out how we can meet the needs of people in the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And that is the basic obsession with anyone who's working in the sustainable development arena. But I'm also interested in understanding vulnerability and resilience to multiple types of hazards in society and how we can increase in resilience. So it's appropriate, I think, Bill, that we're here talking about all of this on Earth Day today.
Terrific. So let's start with a question about this narrative structure of the book. Right from the beginning of the story, I wondered what sparked your idea to create two parallel storylines, including one set so far in the past.
Thanks, Bill. Yes, I get that question quite a bit. And the spark actually came while I was attending Harvard University back in 2000, way back at the turn of the century. I can say that. Yeah, I can say that. I first heard about Easter Island from author Jared Diamond. He spoke to our class back then about a book he was researching at the time called Collapse. And that was for a history of development class taught by economist Jeffrey Sachs, who made us read copious amounts of historic literature. And it was at that time I became a closet historian. But I continued to read a lot about Easter Island for years after that. And what became evident to me was that there was a heated debate among historians and local historians about what actually happened on Rapa Nui. And most people, when they hear mention of Easter Island, think that's the place that built the statues and then cut down all the trees. Well, that impression is influenced by, I guess, what's called the ecocide theory put forth by historians, including Jared Diamond. But the other side of the debate involves genocide, stemming from first contact with outsiders and colonialism after that. You'll have to read the book to learn about how I was influenced by both sides of the debate. But suffice it to say that it's very complex, and that's the point. But that's only half the narrative of Towers of Hiva.
Just to interrupt here, I'm guessing that our participants and readers wonder what Hiva means.
So Hiva is a Polynesian, a Rapa Nui word for the land beyond. And I guess that name is meant to sort of bring connotations that, of course, Easter Island was not the only society to construct, towering statues. we see it in our cities and skylines as symbols of economic might. So in New York, we see skylines, of course, and in New York, we think of Wall Street. And the novel's main character, fictional character, Alec James, is an economist. Now enter the subprime mortgage crisis in 2008. That was a really debilitating time for many people in the United States and around the world. That was a big financial crisis globally. But what struck me was that I had read about a similar crisis that occurred about a decade earlier. And it too was rooted in what's called the over-the-counter derivatives market, and a mostly unregulated market. And at the time I thought to myself, wait a minute, how could such a thing happen twice so close together? And as I read further, there was a very interesting story buried in the history books with some big lessons. And I think I started to see similarities between some of the experiences in Wall Street and the historical experience on Easter Island from the perspective of perfect storms of risk, systemic risk, a polycrisis, where lots of connected risk happens all at once. I sort of saw these things happening both in the distant past and in the recent past. And so I wrapped those two stories together in Towers of Hiva with a nifty, I guess, bridge between the two stories and the two times.
Well, thanks for that, for clarifying that point. I have to say that for me, the contrast between the storylines created a nice continuous pace of action that kept my attention. Now, Darren has selected a brief reading related to one strand of the plot.
Yes, it's a book launch, so I shall read an excerpt, a very short one. So this is right from chapter 1, right out of the gates in the book, sort of set in somewhere in Polynesia in the year 1000. So I'll just read a quick paragraph. With sea salt crusted to his eyelashes, he could barely manage to squint. The reflecting light pierced his eyes and sent a rush of pain through his head. The reward for scanning the blue horizon from his thatched shelter atop the double-hulled canoe only reminded him of the reality of his confines and his family's. At best recollection, Hotu believed they had been on the open water for 20 sunrises. What have I done? So that's if I had the silky smooth voice of Morgan Freeman, I'd keep reading, but I don't. That's Hotu, or King Hotu Matua, also known as the Great Parent, led a journey from the western reaches of Polynesia to a new home on Rapa Nui, later to be known as Easter Island. And they were, of course, Polynesians were extremely skilled ocean navigators, and the history books are pretty clear on that.
So moving on, as you researched and refined the two storylines that we've just been talking about, what key lessons occurred to you?
Yes, there were many as I was researching the two stories, but one that really jumped out at me is what's called a social maturity gap. I didn't know it was called that at the time I was writing, but as I was researching, it became painfully clear that throughout history, that through to the present day, our technological intelligence seems to always outpace our emotional intelligence. And that seems to have led us consistently down some dark trajectories. So think about it. About 500 years ago, we developed a technology for big multi-deck sailing ships that could harness the wind, traverse the globe, carry massive cargo and people, and discover new continents. But we weren't emotionally mature enough at that point to know that a slave trade was a bad idea. I mean, that was insane. Then think, 200 years ago, we invented the steam engine and railroads, where we could move people and cargo vast distances inland, settle remote lands. But we just, as a society, we just weren't didn't have the emotional intelligence and maturity to know that it's a bad idea to use government policy to erase Indigenous peoples' culture and beliefs. That was insane. And the wake of trauma continues to this day, as experienced on many continents. Now think about the combustion engine and climate change, or think about artificial intelligence and its impact on just about everything. I think the social maturity gap is alive and well, and it kind of freaks me out. I think what we really need is a big push, it seems, to close the social maturity gap. That's a complex thing in of itself. Maybe it's like a bit, when there was a big push to educate us as kids on reading, writing, and arithmetic. I think now we need a similar push on literacy for peace, sustainability, and resilience to really understand key things like empathy and understanding systems and humility, and just some of the softer skills, I think, is what we're missing in that social maturity gap. Fortunately, this is starting to happen, but it's just not happening at the right scale and speed.
Great insight. A deeper understanding of the social maturity gap could definitely accelerate progress on many fronts that we're dealing with in human endeavors. And now Darren will read another brief passage from his book, revealing more of the plot.
Okay, this is just a short part from the modern storyline, taken about around chapter 10. This is in Washington, D.C., back, circa 1995. And Alec James, the fictional character, his love interest, Roshanak, is having a chat with a friend, Katie, a colleague, actually. A few quiet minutes passed as the women enjoyed warm sunshine on the balcony. Katie, as usual, broke the silence. Roshanak, did you hear who might be up for the next chair of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission? Roshanak was gazing at the sky again and was slow to respond. No, who? Brooksley Bourne, said Katie with a wide-eyed grin that signaled her approval. Roshanak reacted instantly. No way, she paused. She would be perfect. I hope it's more than just a rumor. The two of them knew Bourne's name well. Brooksley Bourne was a partner at Arnold and Partner law firm and led the derivatives division. And the rumor around Washington a few years ago was that she was being touted as the next U.S. Attorney General, a testament to her success as a lawyer in several high-profile market cases, including when the billionaire Hunt brothers tried to corner the world's silver market in the 1970s. She had also been a champion of women in law, starting the first women's caucus at the American Bar Association and delivering what was believed to be one of the first university courses focused on women in law at Columbia. So apologies for my not so feminine voiceover. Brooksley Bourne is one of the real life persons that the fictional characters in the novel bump into. And Brooksley Bourne's story in and of itself is incredible. And in fact, I wrote the novel as a sort of I guess it's meant to motivate readers to do a lot of Googling. The main character, the fictional characters are fictional, but the historic figures and settings are real and drawn from the history books and news headlines. And some of it will be really hard to believe.
Yeah. Okay, so we're now going to bring our invited panelists into the discussion to get some more views on the takeaways from the book. I'll start by asking Sarija and Günther the following question. A recurring theme in the novel is that a lot can go wrong all at once, just like what we see happening in real life now. Do you agree with this assessment? And based on your experience and writings, what tools do we need to navigate such complexity?
Thank you, Bill. So many things can go wrong all at once. We did see that with COVID as well. It was really a polycrisis. There were so many things which were going wrong at the same time, some expected, some unexpected. And through some of my own research, I feel that to navigate such complexity, a few essential tools are the first, I would say, adaptability, just sharpening our ability to anticipate some shifts and adapt early and respond effectively, which ensures that we remain resilient rather than reactive in unpredictable environments. And at the heart of it must really lie inclusion of different voices and empathy. So, something that Darren also brought up a few minutes ago. The second tool, I would say, continuous evaluation and adjustment. It's also something that the book that Darren had earlier, and we worked together on creating adaptive policies, also talks about this as a very important tool because understanding what worked in the past doesn't really guarantee success in future. We say history repeats itself, but may not always. So regular assessment helps us refine our approach towards problem framing as well as problem solving and ensure that we are constantly evolving with these changing circumstances rather than relying on what may have worked well in the past. And thirdly, I would just like to add that there should always be room for experimentation because rigidity often fails in dynamic situations. So allowing space for new ideas and trial and error encourages innovative problem solving, and it can also open up multiple pathways to address complexity and uncertainty.
Very good. Thanks for those thoughts. I think that we'll be coming back to some of that conversation as we go along. So a second question, Towers of Hiva weaves together two stories around society's precarious experience with peace, sustainability, and resilience, drawing insights from the modern world economy and an historic island society. Based on your writings and experience, what has you feeling optimistic about the future? And what concerns you the most? What other thoughts are triggered by this question? So I'll start with you, Günther, and you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Bill, again. Well, what makes me optimistic is first, I'm still here. I can do something. And we all can do something. The one thing we should not do, it's only one thing. We should not keep alone. That's the obligation. Do something, but do not keep alone. That's the obligation for all of us. And I think that is the very reason for being optimistic. When I look into the global warming, when I look into the loss of nature, and I look into wars and civil conflicts, that does not make me too optimistic. When I look into recent regulation in Europe, which are a little bit on the bureaucratic side, that does not make me optimistic either. When I look into politics, I don't have to extend global politics right now here, but that's not a point that you would be overly optimistic. But then there are people, and I believe in people. I believe in the power of people. I believe in the way we as people are dealing with these things. That's why I think the SDG agenda, the agenda of Sustainable Development Goals, is not over. We will probably not achieve the goals by 2030, but the agenda is not over. There are people out there who care. And that is why I think Towers of Hiva makes the right point. It points to the people, the two characters and their environment. It serves the case well that once there are people who care, then there is a solution. That is a little bit, well, broadly speaking, but you ask a broad question, and so the answer goes. Thank you for this.
Yes, well, we're getting broader and broader in our questions, so they're a little bit more challenging to answer. But I'd like to ask Sarija for her views on this point.
Yeah, so I'll start with what is concerning, a bit echoing what Günther just mentioned. This whole the rise of division and fear in the society. I worry about the increasing tendency to focus on differences rather than shared struggles. And many of these boundaries are really human created. These are artificial boundaries. whether ideological, cultural, or national, and they are being reinforced by fear, leading to an us versus them mindset. The book also sort of touches upon this whole idea of identity and uh, really when what happens when identity is kind of shaken. And this sort of deepening division not only threatens to fragment societies, but it also challenges any kind of collective problem solving, making it harder to address challenges which affect everybody in some way or the other, big or small, such as climate change, economic inequality, and conflict. It will touch everybody in some way or the other. But on a more positive note, despite the many challenges that we face, I remain optimistic about human ingenuity, our ability to learn, adapt, and innovate in response to adversity. And history has shown that when pushed to the brink, societies will always find ways to rethink old systems, challenge status quo, and constantly create solutions that reshape the world again and again. So, in today's highly connected world fueled by technology, a point which Darren also mentioned earlier, there are some negative issues which are amplifying, but there are also positive issues and the collective spirit of humanity, which is still striving to dissolve any of these artificial man made boundaries. So, that gives me hope.
Thanks, Rija, for bringing up that aspect. The division aspect that Srija mentioned is just really kind of at the fore of a lot of things. And hopefully, I guess the core of that, I guess maybe that social maturity, that emotional maturity is about, I guess, the empathy skills and the humility skills that allow people that have different opinions and ideas to really think about the bigger sort of common picture. And that's a softer skill that is going to be really important, I think, for this sort of social maturity gap. So the SDGs Günther mentioned, yes, the Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 Agenda, that to me seems like a lot of the types of things that can help sort of with that social maturity gap, because it does cover a lot of territory and a lot of things that are important to all countries around the world. And there's also things like, well, there's also the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction through the United Nations system as well that helps with risk. But there's also things like the Inner Development Goals, which is sort of advanced through civil society and other non-governmental organizations that are more the softer skills, the empathy, the humility, the systems thinking. And that is, I think, really, really important. And other things like peace literacy is also a movement now that really talks about sort of from an individual and society level, understanding trauma. And
so thank you all for your participation. It's been really a rich discussion. One observation that I have after listening to the various speakers is that many challenges that past civilizations were faced with continue to be challenges for today's civilizations. In a way, this observation is foretold by the different stories told by the author. However, as the world has become progressively more interconnected, managing these challenges has become exponentially more complex, as some of you have referenced. So the author's plea to close the social maturity gap is clearly one lever that must be used. Maybe that's a little bit broad, but I think that brings together a few of the comments that have been made. So I'll open the floor, I think, to Srija, Günther, and Darren for their closing comments.
I feel that change is inevitable. And often we search for very complex solutions when the simplest answers are the ones which matter the most to you. The book Towers of Hiva is a lot about resilience and bouncing back. So in our preparation and response to every shift, every challenge, every new beginning, I believe we must really return to some basic values that guide us. And this may be different for different people and different communities, different cultures. Values such as freedom to move forward without any fear, but also acceptance of differences in opinions, perspectives, and coexistence of diverse experiences. values such as resilience, which the book talks a lot about, the instinct to adapt, persist, and create new possibilities, but also values such as harmony, the balance we seek not just between people, but between all living beings, including us and the environment that we depend on. So I really think that no matter how much the world changes, the values are the constants that we must carry. And if we do, then we may have a chance to navigate even the most uncertain paths with some sense of clarity and purpose.
Thank you very much.
My conclusion is very simple. I would like to double Darren, or to triple him, or to quadruple him, whatever. I think it's very, very important that not me, maybe not you, Bill, but excuse me for this, but young people are encouraged to write about sustainability and resistance and resilience. Young people, they have to find a different language from the language we used in the last, as a community, in the last like 50 years. We have developed a language full of technicalities, of abbreviations, of short jargon even, that does not translate in real life experiences of people outside. And the point of value, Darren, that you did is to translate all this rich experience that we all have in the inner side of the community into something that goes out. And we should be aware that this is exactly what we need. We maybe not need a new narrative for sustainability, but we need new language, new ideas to translate the fate we are facing in terms of global warming, in terms of nature, into stories that matter. And if you ever find a rich company from Hollywood who is doing the screenplay for you, for the Towers of Hiva, then encourage them to invite young people from all over the world to come to a place like Winnipeg. Then you teach them about your deep knowledge in sustainable development and develop them into novelists. That would be great. That's my conclusion.
There's a challenge for you.
Challenge accepted.
That's good. So Darren, author, researcher, understander of some of these complex questions. You're the final say.
Well, thank you. Well, my final say, I just want to say a lot of thank yous to everyone online here today. I do hope you enjoyed the book and have time to reflect on its themes of peace, sustainability, and resilience. Just a few things to say. Stay tuned for a video podcast series that I plan to roll out here bi-monthly to talk with people from Easter Island, from Wall Street, and beyond about topics of peace, sustainability, resilience, to talk with young people about sort of communicating and storytelling. That's a lot. The publisher of the book, NovelFutures, the publishing house that I've started for this, has, that sort of a bit of a vision to kind of really work and sort of work on that creativity aspect, especially with young people, as Günther mentioned. A shout out to folks online that are from United Nations, Rotary International folks, International Institute for Sustainable Development, folks in organizations. Keep up the amazing work around the world on these topics. And lastly, I'm excited to announce that through NovelFutures, the publisher of Towers of Hiva, that I'll be donating half the proceeds of Towers of Hiva to support Indigenous sustainability, resilience, and peace initiatives on Easter Island and around the world. May the path to truth and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples be everywhere, be traveled by all. Thank you, everyone, today. Merci, miigwech, danke, dhanyavad, and Mauro Uru.